Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Lightyear. Yeah, so this is the kind of Toy Story spin off movie, or it's supposed to be the movie that Andy saw that made him want to get Buzz Lightyear for his birthday in 1995. The thing with this movie and its reputation, and I'm seeing this rather late, I'm seeing this a lot later than most people. I saw it on Disney Plus when it premiered in August. Not in June when everyone else saw it. That thing about Andy is like a title card, maybe two, at the beginning, and it is never brought up again. If you look at any review of this movie, it is like primarily about those title cards and the idea that, guess what, this isn't Far From Heaven, but, with Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers, which sounds amazing, but they didn't obviously do that. They sort of made a sci-fi movie inspired by Interstellar and The Martian and, pretty much like what you'd expect a modern sci-fi movie to be, which, yeah, is less interesting. But I kind of came to terms with this film where, I never really liked that it wasn't, Far From Heaven with, Paul Verhoeven Starship Troopers or something. And I thought there'd be more to it. I'm not mad at this movie or anything. I like it. But I do think people are a little too harsh on it. Because what I think this film is trying to do is basically just be what used to be a PG action adventure film for the whole family, in the 80s and 90s, in terms of tone. You could do scarier stuff. Now everything's very niche and very much about certain demos and age groups. For example, I showed my daughter really likes Spidey and His Amazing Friends. So I was like, oh, you should watch Spider-Man show I grew up with. So watch the Fox Kids one with the lizard, and that was really scary. But when I was a kid, kids her age did watch that. And that's what was going on. So what I think this movie is actually doing is trying to be, well, what would the kind of movie Andy saw in 1995 be like now? How would you make that movie now? And if you look at it under that guise, it works. It is a kid family film. It has morals as such. I think the morals sort of work out and everything like that. With Buzz realizing throughout that he shouldn't just be on this mission to get them off of it, that he's missing out on life. And without working together as a team, you're not fully solving the problem and you're not fully experiencing life without the love and the support of other people, which I think this film does that very well. I will be talking about spoilers. This film's been out for a while, so if you didn't figure that out. But I think that's actually very beautiful for a kid's film. And I like where it did. This is I thought that was very smart. And as much as we're hey, they don't make enough action adventure animated stuff, that's basically what this is. I like that about it. But I do think the Andy thing probably should have not been in here at all. Probably would have been better not to have it. I think there's a lot of critic bias that's going on in terms of well, this Pixar movie should have gone to theaters, or Turning Red or Luca or whatever. And it's yeah, but the pandemic, kids couldn't get vaccinated until after Turning Red came out. So let's just stop that argument right there, because they obviously had a health concern, and so they didn't want to do that. I thought it was a morally good decision. Lightyear came out after most children under 5 can be vaccinated. More kids can get vaccinated who are under certain ages and stuff. So, I think that's why. I don't think it's because they were oh, this is the most marketable and the rest goes to Disney Plus, which I've noticed people are playing with narratives. That is not actually what happened. As a parent, I can tell you it was a vaccination thing, I think, because people just couldn't get vaccinated. Anyway, so you can stop saying that, because it's not really very smart. What I do find interesting about this is it's a spin-off of Toy Story. It's about Buzz Lightyear in this weird spin-off thing, but they don't do a ton of references. I think they do when Buzz Lightyear in the original Toy Story, he is on Andy's bed and he comes out and does the intercom thing. They do various references in it. I think one of the ships at the end my wife saw was the ship he came in, all sorts of stuff like that, but not really enough. I thought there was going to be that's not flying, that's falling with style. I thought there was going to be a lot more, and they don't really do that. I don't really understand why they don't. I know it's I'm asking this film to be cheesy, but I wouldn't have minded it, to be honest. If they had just given me 3 or 4 more. The Toy Story films are fairly quoted all the time. I don't really get why they didn't do that, but whatever. It is interesting to see a character who goes through time and does something like that. Sort of reminds me of Flight of the Navigator, but a lot more times. Another thing, and then I'll talk about a super spoiler thing, I guess, towards the end, is that, when I saw this, all the puff pieces of John Lasseter came out from various places that I thought were more credible, like the Hollywood Reporter, I believe, did one, the New York Times did one, and they're all talking about how he is as a studio head and how he'll replace directors who love the movie and stuff like that. I've often felt like Toy Story 4 would have been a good retirement for him when he was saying he was just gonna retire and stop making stuff, because honestly, before the Me Too thing with him, he doesn't really need to do anything more. He has a pretty big legacy. He could have just let it go and walked away, and have Toy Story 4 be the last one would be a beautiful sort of send-off. Obviously that didn't happen because he's gross, but with this one, I almost think this is the first one that's really made and developed, although I think it was first pitched before he left. This is about teamwork, and it seemed like it was kind of his way or the highway. It wasn't really a team. It was like John Lasseter and everyone does what he says, or he's going to change it, and it's all for the interest of him. And the fact that this is the first film with the least involvement of him, and it's all about the power of teamwork, is something I can at least read into. Maybe I'm just reading into that with Toy Story 4 and this, and I'm incredibly off, but I sort of sense that in there. I like, the cast with Chris Evans, Keke Palmer, Taika Waititi, or at least in America, that's the cast. Peter Son is the cat. The one casting, I guess this is a spoiler, that I was confused by was James Brolin, who plays older Buzz Lightyear. To me, that's a pretty easy casting for Tim Allen. Just have Tim Allen do that, and it could have been interesting, could have had this fun moment. Instead, it was was that Chris Evans? Oh, it's not Chris Evans, is it? Who is it? It's there was no importance to that, and that felt like a pretty missed opportunity. I don't think there's an older Captain America actor you could get that would add any elements to that. If you had Schwarzenegger, who was a space guy going in space at the time, something where it's oh my god, and that would have been a cool little thing. Instead, it's James Brolin, star of Westworld, the movie, not the show. I really didn't understand why you cast him. Not that everyone has to be a cool reference, but it's if you're going to do the time travel thing and have him meet himself, why not have to be Tim Allen? That would have been so cool. I don't understand that. And the references in this, I don't really understand what they're fully doing. Yeah, this did remind me of being a kid and seeing things like Willow, seeing things like Master Universe. They could be a little violent or scary and still be appealing to me for some reason. Now they don't really let you do that. I'm not saying it's cancer culture or kids are too soft. Just media change. Back then, there was just what was on TV. There was no streaming services. Now you can fulfill all those different niches, and at the time you couldn't do that. So people would just have to deal. And I do think that's an interesting idea to make a film like that. It plays they're all a grown-up sci-fi thing, but for everyone, which I liked. And I like Chris Evans as this character. I also like what it says about pushing forward or something, and realizing you missed everything, which I think everyone in life, no matter what you're doing, can feel. It's you're working on your career, and you look and you see your kid can walk or something, and you're disappointed that you missed that moment, so you could go to the big meeting or do what is responsible. I don't think this, in some ways, is irresponsible. I think this film brings up a lot of interesting points and works kind of in the classical sci-fi sense, because it's is what he's doing responsible? There's a moral argument to say, well, what he's doing is what needs to happen, because ultimately this is not a habitable planet that they're on, because in this film he crashes this big spacecraft they're on, and they stay there and they move to a city and stuff. But if people have started their lives there and that's their home, are you doing good anymore? Is this about you realizing you need to fix your mistake more than a solution that anyone really wants? And which one is the moral one? Maybe safety-wise he has a point. Maybe in another way, these people have moved on with their lives and have just been we're okay with this now. It brings up some interesting thoughts, and I think in a very clear way. I like how it does those things. Now, I don't love the ranking of films in general or Pixar, because you get into this stupid thing where nothing will be as good as that thing. You're sure, whatever. But as for what this actually is, and not talking about how these other things came in theaters, and this should really be the reboot that Andy took his kids to, not the movie that he saw and all that stuff. Like, who cares? But as a movie itself, I quite liked it, actually. I thought they did a good job under what it was, and under the guise of what it was, and I knew what I was getting into. I watched it with my family and stuff, and that's what I liked about it, because it's not like your average Pixar thing. I do like that, like, the past couple Pixars, like Luca and Turning Red and this, are visually not the same. I think they're about characters overcoming something and realizing something about themselves. Maybe that's the Pete Docter era of Pixar, but I knew what I was getting into, and I'm not sure if everyone did. I understand the animosity towards it, and even with 4, people didn't love that they made that one. It doesn't seem people love that they made this. But if you judge this film on what it is and not what it isn't, or what a couple title cards says, it works out pretty well for what it is. Is it the greatest Pixar film? No, it does feel a little lesser, but I like that they experimented with something, so I almost don't want to call it lesser, because they actually tried. They tried. They did it with IP, and they tried. It seems like for most people it didn't work out, but I applaud them for actually doing something a little different. I hope if they do this again, I'd be curious to see them do these kind of different takes as characters and stuff. I don't think it's too hard to understand, like, once you get into it, what it is, and you kind of figure it out and you move forward with it. But Lightyear, I think, is, maybe mid-tier Pixar, is still an interesting enough film, and I think they at least understand what they're doing, what morally they're doing, what this film says for the kids. That seemed to be more of its focus than doing like, oh, well, we need to have a bunch of Toy Story references. But it does feel a little divorced from it. You do question, why would you even make this while watching it? But I still think it is a good watch, even though you're questioning yourself. But that's sort of existence anyway, so I guess in a way it's sort of like an average Wednesday. Sometimes you're okay with it, sometimes you're not, and a lot of people just wish it was over and never happened in the first place. But I think if you were able to meet it and be in the present and receive it for what it is, you'll have an okay Wednesday, and hopefully you can move on to Thursday and Friday. And you'll probably maybe forget this, but if you look back, you'll probably have a little bit of a smile that Wednesday tried to be at least a little bit of something, and that's kind of neat. So if you've seen Lightyear and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.